I remember when I passed up my first 150. I didn't know of a single other person who had passed up a legit 150.
Don Higgins, one of the most well-known whitetail land managers of our time.
I don't consider myself an expert. I consider myself a student of the whitetail. One of the goals that I've had for a long time now is each season, I want to end that season more knowledgeable than when I started.
And I try to come up with as many questions that he hasn't been asked before. What do you think most people misunderstand or misrepresent with you?
Well, that's a good one.
We're going to get into it right now. Here we go.
When a buck shows up now on this farm, if I want to kill him, I'll kill him.
Well, we're finishing up a day of more Master Academy content. And it's fun sitting here and just be able to pick your brain. And then I'm thinking of all the members and people I've talked to, the questions that they've had over the years. And I'm trying to answer my questions, their questions, and using you to share what you think. It's been fun.
Yeah, I'm glad you guys made it out today. And we've covered a lot of topics and still got a few to go.
Yes, absolutely. And so I asked you this question when we got back from lunch, and I said, don't answer it because I want to ask on the podcast. So I'll start with this one. What was harder to harvest, your first Pope and Young or your first Boone and Crockett buck?
Well, probably the first Pope and Young, because back in those days, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have trail cameras. We didn't have food plots. Didn't have hunting leases. It was just basically woodsmanship skills, and there wasn't as many deer. It was very rare for a bow hunter to kill a 150-inch buck. I mean, if somebody in your county killed a 150-inch buck, the whole county was talking about it. So, yeah, back in those days, I'd say killing a Pope and Young was big news.
At what decade did killing a big deer become not as big as news? Like the 90s, would you say?
Probably the 90s, yeah.
Okay.
And that depends on what you're calling big, too. I mean,
so using like Pope and Young to 150, I guess 150.
Yeah, in the 90s, it became not near as big a deal.
Uh-huh. Yeah. What was harder, your first Pope and Young or your first 200?
Well, when I killed the first 200, I really didn't have a goal of killing a 200. I wanted to kill a world-class buck, whatever that might be. And, yeah, it took what? I shot him in 2004, and I started hunting in 77. So it took me 27 years to kill that 200.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that was probably harder than a Pope and Young, even back in the day when there weren't a whole lot of Pope and Youngs.
Yeah. It's just fun to look over. It's fun to see your perspective of how the whitetail herd has changed over the decades and years, and to where now, back then, a Pope and Young was a big deal because there wasn't as many, and now a Pope and Young is, I hate to say it, but not as big of a feat for a lot of parts of the country than what it was, around that era.
Well, today we've got lots of guys passing up bucks that score 150 inches, which is 25 inches bigger than Pope and Young.
Yeah.
So even passing up a 125-inch buck back in those days was just totally unheard of.
Yeah.
I remember when I passed up my first 150, I didn't know of a single other person who had passed up a legit 150.
Uh-huh.
I don't remember what year that was. I know it was before I was still working in the factory at the time, and I got out of there in 2002. So I'm going to say somewhere around the late 90s, I passed up my first 150, and I did not know a single person who had passed a 150. And when I told people I did, I'm going to guess most of them did not believe me. So come a long ways. There's a lot of guys past 150s today, but, we're 25 or so years later.
Whatever happened to that 150 you passed?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Never know.
Nope.
Yeah, not a trail cameras is way harder to keep track of a deer, I
right.
have to imagine.
Yeah, we didn't have trail cameras when I did that.
Yeah.
At all. So.
Yeah. I gave you a disclaimer before we started this. I said this is going to feel like a Master Academy live event because I have a bunch of unrelated questions. So
that's all right. Fire away. I got an opinion about everything.
Have you ever killed a buck and later regretted it? And what'd you do about it?
Absolutely, I did. Yeah, it was on the same farm. It's Permission Farm that I passed my first 150. It wasn't that year, But yeah, I can recall that hunt. I got in my stand before daylight that morning. It was in November, and heard some rustling around in the leaves beneath my stand, and it was still so dark that I really had to squint to see what it was. I mean, I couldn't tell if it was a coyote, a deer, or a cow. And the more I squinted, and it started getting just a little bit daylight, I seen it was 2 deer, and it was a big buck and a doe, and they had worked out away from me. By the time the sun come up that I could really see these deer well, they'd worked out of shooting range, and it was a big buck. I mean, I'm going to say 160 inch, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
And the buck, obviously he was, hot on that doe, right on her tail, and they disappeared. And I was hunting along a little creek that had just some brush along both sides that kind of wound through this farm, and they went one direction down this creek, and it wasn't, I'm telling you, they got out of sight, and it wasn't, I don't know, maybe 30 minutes later at the most, there's a buck coming from the direction that they went, and I could see the buck that I'd seen earlier had really white antlers, really light colored, and this buck coming through the brush, he's got really light colored antlers, and I'm thinking, here he comes, and I'm ready to draw my bow, and as the buck steps out, I draw and shoot almost in one motion, hit the buck great, didn't go very far at all, but I get up to him, and it was a little 2.5, 3.5-year-old buck. It's like, and it was my second buck tag for that season, so I was done for the year. And that's him right up there, his skull right above the door. So I put my tag on him and sucked it up and was done hunting for that season. But, boy, I'll tell you what, I made darn sure after that. That was a long time ago, too. That's pushing 30 years ago. But I made up my mind right then. I'm going to be darn careful when I let loose of an arrow.
Yeah.
Exactly what buck I'm shooting at.
That had to be a wave of emotion where you think you shot a 160. Because where would that 160-ish deer ranked in your best deer category?
Back then, it would have probably been my best, or one of the best,
yeah,
for sure. It'd have been in my top 2 or 3. The rest of the story is I walk up to the buck I'd shot, and he's down, and then I walk out to the road to get my truck and drive my truck back to get the thing loaded. And so I'd walked out the road. I'm driving my truck back, and I'm following this creek that kind of winds around. On the edge of the field is where I'm driving, and I come around a bend, and there's the buck and the doe that I'd seen earlier out in the corn stalks, big old rack, and I'm loading up this little dink. I don't know. I'm going to guess. You think he's 3 years old or 2?
Probably
2 or 3.
But yeah.
And I'm loading him up, and here's this giant watching me do it. And, well, I'll tell you what, it drove the lesson home, and never made that mistake again.
That's that I can't imagine. How disappointed were you on a scale of 1 to 10?
I was extremely disappointed. I mean, it was just a lesson that
it happens.
It happened, and I sucked it up, and I just knew I'd never do that again.
Yeah.
And
I think there's some people that would have said, "Oh, I didn't shoot that deer."
Or some people would have went home and had their wife go to town and buy a tag and stick on it or whatever, but I've never done that, and I wasn't about to start then, and was what it was. I never did it again, I can tell you that.
A hard lesson learned.
Yep.
Hard lesson learned.
The Whitetail Podcast is brought to you by Moultrie. One of the first cameras I ever bought was a Moultrie, and they've come a long way. Whether after your first deer ever or this is your 20th year of hunting, Moultrie has you covered. Their cellular trail cameras have no SD card, very easy to use and set up right out of the box. I love to pair the Power Mag with a Pro Series camera. The Moultrie cameras are affordable, effective, and reliable with US-based customer service, 2-year warranty, and just a great camera. So the next time you're in the store and you're trying to decide what camera to buy, I encourage you to try a Moultrie if you want to support the podcast.
Have you ever had a gut feeling moment? I always try to follow my gut, and I feel like when I don't follow my gut, I usually have a not as successful hunt. But have you ever had a gut feeling moment in the woods that your gut was completely wrong, that sticks out to you? You're like, oh, this is definitely it. This, everything's perfect. I feel really, really good, and then something completely different happens, which happens a lot of hunts.
Well, it happens to me all the time because I've got a positive attitude. And every day I go to the woods, I think I'm going to kill a giant.
Yeah.
Most time you don't. But if you got a positive attitude, it probably happens a lot.
Yeah. How many sits did it take to kill this buck last year? Because you killed him October 9th. Yeah,
not many. Probably 4 or 5, maybe.
Yeah. How much has? At what point did you're having a lot more success in October than what you have in decades or years previously? What do you attribute that to? Fine-tuning your farm, mainly?
That's a big part of it. When a buck shows up now on this farm, if I want to kill him, I'll kill him. And it's not because I'm a great hunter. It's just because I've been here long enough and have set the farm up in such a way that I know how these bucks are going to travel. I know how they're going to use the wind. I know where they're going to be in the early season. I know what they're going to do during the rut. I know what they're going to do during the late season. And there's just about no way that a buck, I don't care how old he is going to make it through an entire 3.5-month archery season without walking past me. Now, I've had bucks that I thought I was going to kill right away that took me a month or so. I recall one, it was back around, I don't know, probably 2019, 2020, that I was on him from the get-go, and I didn't shoot him until November 4th. And
was it Mel?
No, it was the buck right here.
Okay.
The one that's kind of turned towards us.
Yeah.
Didn't really have a name for him. I guess we called him the fork tine buck because he always had a fork G2. But then he hurt his foot, and we got some good video footage of him dragging that one back foot, and actually have used his photo in a real-world Generation 2 soybean ad. He's out. Kyle Harmon was here hunting and took that photo in the snow where that buck was feeding in the soybeans. And then it was the next year that I shot him. But I was trying to get that buck killed right out of the gate, and it took me until November 4th to get it done. But then, ironically, the very next day, on November 5th, I went to a permission property, and I killed my second buck. So I had a tough October that year, but then in 2 days, I filled my 2 buck tags. So you just never know, but you think you got them figured out. But I just have never had a buck in, say, the last decade or more that I've wanted to kill that I did not get a chance to and get it done.
Well, yeah, which do you attribute that to also, so just learning farm, fine-tuning the mousetrap, you becoming better? Did you ever think Bobby Worthington, guy that you respect a bunch, says killing bucks is simple, but it's difficult, or something to the effect of that. So what I'm getting at is, did you ever think you'd be able to say, if there's a deer on my farm, I'm going to kill it? Because it seems like it's kind of, I don't want to say it's new, but you are way more efficient than probably 15 years ago, I have to imagine. Like way more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that have become reality that have gone beyond my wildest dreams. I mean, the fact that every year I'm passing up bucks 170 and better, and I never thought that would happen. I mean, that was beyond even imagination back in the day. I guess I don't really recall ever having those thoughts that the day would come where I hoped I could kill any buck on the farm. I mean, I guess that was probably in the back of my mind, but it just isn't something that's really stuck with me.
Yeah. Okay. It's just, and we were talking over lunch too, of just, I feel that it's taken 30 years, and then guys like myself and me, like, man, I'd love to have the level of efficiency you do, the setup that you do from like a hunting perspective, but I haven't put 30 years I haven't put in my dues, and I feel like that's something to bring up, and I'm happy to hear your thoughts about it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't consider myself an expert. I consider myself a student of the whitetail. And so I'm always trying to learn. And one of the goals that I've had for a long time now is each season I want to end that season more knowledgeable than when I started. And that's more knowledgeable about the whitetail, mature bucks specifically, but also more knowledgeable about my property, and just watching how deer traverse across the property, how they utilize different parts of the property. And I sit there in my stand and I just dwell on what little things can I do to make it even a little bit better. And, some of the little things I do today, I would have never even thought about years ago, like these fruit orchards that I've really come to appreciate. I mean, in early October, the deer just absolutely hammer those orchards. I mean, you can walk through one of those orchards with the fruits falling, and there's not a single piece of fruit on the ground. Those deer and other wildlife are cleaning that stuff up as fast as it falls. Mm-hmm. I've sit there and I've watched and I've actually got photos of coyotes and deer under the same tree feeding on pears. Coyote's got a pear in his mouth, the deer's got a pear in its mouth, and they're on either side of a tree, maybe less than 10 yards apart.
Wow.
And so they have become like critter magnets. They just attract, coons, possums, coyotes, whatever, deer, they're all feeding under those fruit trees. And when you've got the only one in the whole neighborhood, and now I've got 3 of them on my farm and scattered, for different wind directions and such, it's fun to sit there and just watch all that different game come in. But, 20 years ago, I didn't have the knowledge I had to plant that first one and see it work. Yeah. And then I planted the next 2. And it's that experience that you can't buy it. You can't just dream it up. You got to live it. And that takes time. And, it doesn't matter what the topic is, if it's deer hunting or something else, but you can ask, any 30-year-old, and they're going to tell you they knew more about whatever topic than they did when they was 20. Uh-huh. You can ask any 40-year-old, and he's going to tell you he knows more than he did when he was 30. And now at 60, I know more than I did when I was 50. And I know when I was 50, I knew more than I did when I was 40. And I think that's a lesson I try to get through to the young guys, is that especially, I was a cocky young guy too when I was in my 30s. I thought I was a great deer hunter and knew all this about whitetails. And yet as the years have gone by, I realized not only how little I knew back then, but I also realized how little I know today. And, I also say that there's not a one of us that knows as much about deer hunting as a yearling buck. Just think about that, a 1.5-year-old buck, how naive and stupid they are running around. They all ought to be dead. If there was a bounty on them, they all would be dead. But yet not one of us deer hunters knows as much as a yearling buck. And so we have so much more to learn. And I think that's the thing that has really struck me in recent years is the more I know, the more I realize how little I know.
What's a whitetail mystery that you're still trying to figure out?
Well, how do these deer survive? That's the big one for me. Well, how does a buck get to be 6 years old when everything's against him? He's born a little 5 to 7 pound critter that's so gullible. Every predator in the woods could kill him if they could just find him. And yet he survives. And then he goes through, numerous hunting seasons where, there's an army of people trying to end his life. He's living outside in the elements where, he's got to survive lean winters,
summers,
pneumonia type weather that could make him sick. He goes through the rigors of the rut and loses a bunch of body weight and then has to deal with the winter after that. He's got to put a lot of his energy into growing a new rack every year, a lot of his nutrition, and yet somehow, and he stays hidden from people the whole time. In fact, a lot of these mature bucks that I find off of my farm, people don't even know they exist. The landowner whose land they are living on, doesn't even know the deer exist. He may know he's got deer on his farm, but he doesn't know that this 6-year-old buck is living on his farm and spending his daylight hours on his farm. And I just find it amazing that I almost wish we could put a GPS tracker
so cool.
on a mature buck in my hunting area where I know the terrain and I know the landowners and I know what's going on, and see just where do these guys hide at in the peak of firearm season every year. How do they slip by and survive? And I guess that's the big mystery for me is how do these bucks make it to 6, 7 years old?
All odds are against them, and I always wonder too when I'm bored sitting in the tree how many times these deer escape death, and maybe one of them might have been me when I was thinking about that, not paying attention to.
Yeah, I also wonder how many bucks have seen me while I've been in the woods that I'd never seen them. Going to my stand or leaving my stand or out on a scouting mission or doing habitat work or whatever. How many mature bucks? How many Boone and Crockett bucks over the years watched me hang a tree stand or do this or do that, and I never had any idea they was anywhere around. That intrigues me how these bucks can just be so reclusive right under our noses and we don't even know they're there.
If you had a genie in a bottle and you had 3 wishes, would you use that as one of your wishes?
Possibly.
Possibly. Fair. What's a piece of gear or technology you refuse to use even if it might help you kill more deer?
Well, that's a good one. Well, I refuse to use a mechanical broadhead just because I think there's better alternatives. I think there's more humane alternatives, and I'll be the first to admit that if you hit a deer right, mechanical is going to kill him. He's probably going to leave a bigger hole and a bigger blood trail, but hit him in the shoulder, and what do you got? Countless deer have been lost because they were hitting the shoulder with a mechanical, and that's just something that I refuse to do because I've shot deer in the shoulder with, a cut-on contact broadhead and went right through the shoulder and killed that deer, go less than 100 yards, more than one. Mel, the buck right over my shoulder. You can see the video if you go to the Mel video on YouTube. You can see where I hit him right through the shoulder, and the arrow stopped on the opposite shoulder, the exit side shoulder. I've done that more than once, and those deer would have been wounded and lost if I'd have been shooting a mechanical more than likely. So I think it's not my place to tell everybody what they can shoot. If they want to shoot mechanical, that's their business, not mine. I'm telling you why I won't.
Yeah.
A crossbow, I won't say I'm never going to use a crossbow. I would definitely shoot a crossbow before I would stop hunting. If health reasons required me to shoot a crossbow or give it up, I would shoot a crossbow. I do not think that able-bodied people should be able to use a crossbow during the entire archery season. But then again, it's their right to choose. It's not my place to tell everybody what to shoot and what not to shoot, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. I kind of guessed that was going to be your answer. Some of them. How has your definition of a successful season changed since your early years?
That's a good one too. I
tried thinking of some new things.
Well, when you're younger, you measure success by game on the ground, and not necessarily the size of the antlers, but you could shoot a doe, and that was a successful hunt, and it would be today too. But today, I don't have to kill anything to have a successful hunt. I just like being out there and observing something that you don't get to see every day. Last season, for example, I watched a bobcat, walk right under my stand and then go down into a creek and walk the creek bed. I've watched mink chase rabbits from my stand. Just all kinds of things that you wouldn't see, even walking through the woods, you wouldn't see it. But
right.
Sitting in your stand, letting nature go about its business without knowing you're around, you just get to see a lot of things like that. And I consider those a successful hunt. Even just watching a sunrise from the woods, watching that sun come up over the eastern horizon and slowly light up the woods around you.
Birds chirping.
Absolutely. That's a successful hunt today. So
yeah,
it's not about game. It's not even about shooting.
Was it always like that? Were you always that sentimental about a hunt?
Well, I always enjoyed that part of it, but that was not near as important as it is today. I liked seeing the other critters go about their business while I sit in a deer stand, but I also wanted to kill a darn deer while I was there too. And today, if I shoot a deer, I know the work begins. I got to field dress that thing. I got to, process it or take it to somewhere to be processed. And, it's just a bunch of work begins. And I don't mind that part of it. I'm not going to not shoot a deer because of that. But just seeing the game is and also when you hunt your own property, last year I did something for the first time I've never done before. And it wasn't because it wasn't even by design. It wasn't like I set out and planned to do it. But every hunt that I had last year was on my farm. I didn't hunt one place off of my farm.
Really?
And the reason for it was I didn't have a target buck off of my farm. And, you know, I've got permission on a number of different properties. I've got trail cameras. I think I had trail cameras on 26 different properties last year, but I only hunted one of those 26. 25 properties I had cameras and did not ever hunt. And the reason for it, I don't want to go and sit in my stands on other properties and educate the deer when there's not a shooter buck there. I would much rather stay on my home farm, enjoy seeing the habitat I've created, enjoy watching the critters utilize that habitat, getting video footage of bucks that I may shoot in the future. That just, I don't know. I'm getting old and sentimental, I guess. It means a whole lot more to me than it used to.
So that's when you think about it in another way too, is 25 other farms and not another target buck. You had 2 buck tags here in the state of Illinois, which goes to show how rare some of these really big deer are.
And it's becoming even more rare. I've been running a bunch of trail cameras on a bunch of properties for many years now. And it used to be I would talk about 170-inch bucks and how many miles it would be between, in my guesstimation, between 170-inch bucks. And that distance just became greater and greater. Well, now I don't even talk about 170-inch deer. Off of my farm, it's 150, and I'm not looking to shoot 150s. I'm looking to shoot, bigger than 170. Mm-hmm. And those deer become so rare off of my farm that, they're just, I can't even tell you how many miles it is. So why do I want to go sit someplace where I know there's absolutely zero chance of a deer coming by that I want to shoot? And when I can sit on my own farm, I can enjoy what I've created. I can see bucks that are bigger than I can see on these other properties. And even though I'm not going to shoot them, I can get video footage. I can watch them. I can watch how deer relate to various habitat projects and how they utilize different parts of my farm differently. So, it's also helped me become way more efficient on this farm.
By observing that
exactly.
So much more, like so many more scout hunts.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, if you had a guess, how many miles is between, we'll say 150?
In my neck of the woods, it's more than 10.
Wow. Dang.
Yeah, it's more than 10 miles between 150s.
Yeah.
And that wasn't always the case.
Was it used to be like 1 or 2?
Oh, it used to be that there was a 150 in every section. You could hunt any section in this neighborhood
and have a chance at
for miles.
Yeah.
And you could get photos and have a chance to shoot a 150. Those days are over.
Yeah. That's crazy.
One of the most overlooked pieces of gear when it comes to whitetail hunting is your glass, and that's why I trust Hawk Optics. I've used all sorts of different binoculars over the years, and I truly believe that Hawk dollar for dollar is one of the best options. There's premium glass, a lifetime no-fault warranty, and the Frontier series has been great. I would put it up against any of the glass I've used in the past, and even some more expensive pieces of glass. So if you're ready to upgrade your glass, get a new pair of binoculars, use code WHTL15, or check them out in a retail store and give them a shot. Hawk Optics, vision accomplished.
What's the biggest lie hunters tell each other or themselves?
Well, it's probably you can't kill a deer sitting on the couch. I think they think that the more time they spend in the woods in a stand, they increase their odds. And, numerically or statistically, maybe there's some merit to that. But when it comes right down to real world, that's not the case. I hunt probably less today than I ever have, but I spend more time preparing today than I ever have. And it's that preparation that puts me in position for success when I do hunt. Mm-hmm. And I think there's a lot of people fool themselves into thinking, I got to go to the woods. I got to go hunt. I got to go hunt because, each hunt takes me one step closer to finally shooting a buck. And a lot of times what they're doing is they're burning out their stands. They're burning out their properties. They're educating the deer. And actually, the more they hunt, their odds just go down instead of up.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the key thing there, too, is I'm doing more preparation than I ever have, and I'm hunting less. Where you can't also kill. You can't not do preparation and then also hunt. Well, let me ask you this: would you be better off to, in this scenario, this simulation, no preparation and hunt a bunch, or no preparation and still hunt very little?
Well, if you're going to have no prep, then you better spend some time in the woods.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, there's someone listening to this saying, "Hey, Don said hunt less," and hasn't prepared, and they're like, "Man, I just haven't had a good season for a while."
Well, the hours I spend prepping, most people, to be fair and to be honest, most people don't have the opportunity, and I didn't always either. When I owned my tree business, for example, fall was our busy season, and we had to let those trees go dormant before we started digging them in the fall, and typically that meant about the 1st of November it was time to start digging trees. Well, man, that was the time I wanted to be in the woods. So I understand that I've got a pretty special situation today, but I'm 61 years old right now too, and it's taken a long time to get here. It's like I was reading something yesterday that about millionaires and millionaires in the United States, and it said the average person that becomes a millionaire does not reach millionaire status until he's 57 years old. And it doesn't happen overnight. And it's the same way with big buck success. To do it consistently, you got to build on it.
Yeah.
And like these folks building wealth to finally become millionaires, it takes decades. And with killing big deer consistently, yeah, you can cut some corners with money. Money will put you in on some good properties and that. But to learn the ropes, you can be on the best property in North America, and I'd be willing to bet that the majority of deer hunters, if they were put on any property in North America where they wanted to go, most deer hunters would not be able to kill the best buck on that farm.
How confident are you in that? Because
I'm very confident in that, and I believe that they think that it's all about where they're at, and that's a big part of it. Don't get me wrong. Where you hunt is huge, but it's the experience. How do you know what to do when you're on the best property? Most people are going to burn it out. They're going to burn out their stands. They're going to have terrible access to their stands. They're not going to play the wind right, and those are things that you learn over time. It doesn't matter what books you read, what classes you go to, what videos you watch on YouTube. You're not going to learn that. The only way to learn it's in the field. Yeah. Real world experience, firsthand experience, and that takes time. It takes decades. And just like becoming a millionaire, if you want to kill big bucks consistently, it takes decades of work to put yourself in a position to do that.
Yeah, because we've all seen the chart where the amount you put in and then the compound interest of that, and so you're saying the same thing of
absolutely
keep chipping away, and you are going to get better and better and better with different levels of effort. Yeah, that's pretty interesting, because everyone has said, I bet you this might even been said today somewhere in the United States, I could kill big deer if I hunted Don Higgins' farm too. So that was probably said somewhere today.
And you know what? There's a lot of people that would. But there's a lot of people that would burn this place out and they'd ruin it in one season.
Yeah.
But just to go to a farm where you've got to pick your stand sites.
Yeah, strip this thing all the way. The framework is the same. All blinds, all tree stands, and then okay, here's the keys.
Yeah. Well, first of all, this property today has been developed, so the food plots are in the right places where they need to be.
Yeah.
The bedding cover is situated the way it needs to be. The work has been done, but for the average deer hunter to just get dropped off on the property of his choice and say, "Here's the best buck on the property, go kill him." At the end of the season, most deer hunters are not going to have that deer on the ground.
I don't disagree. I think
I'd be willing to bet on it.
All right, just let me come hunt this farm this year. We'll see if we can try it.
I don't know about that. But
okay, all right. Well, we're making a bet.
Yeah.
I bet you I won't now. Oh, that's funny. What do you think most people misunderstand or misrepresent with you?
Well, there's a lot of things actually. I think people don't understand where I came from. I think they look at where I'm at today and they don't understand the journey from point A to point B. And there was a lot of struggles along the way. Man, I could turn this into a soap opera, but I don't think they realize that I, at one time, was not only where they are at today, I was probably even below where they are at today. As far as financially, I've said many times, we were so poor when we got married. My wife and I had our electricity shut off multiple times, our phones shut off, creditors calling, stack of bills on the kitchen table continually. And we struggled for decades and finally worked our way out of that.
Were you guys, this is a harsh question, but were you guys bad with money, or was it an income issue?
No, it was, we both worked, and we both worked overtime. I'd gotten divorced before we got married, and I had to pay child support, so that was just a huge burden financially on us. But we finally got through it. So and people today, they see Don lives in a new house. He's driving these nice tractors, doing his food plots, and he owns this great hunting farm. They don't see the decades. I didn't have that even a few years ago. Nothing like what I've got now. And I've been extremely blessed. And I remember what it was like to have nothing. So I can relate to these people who look at me like that guy's got it made. But what they don't see is the journey that got me here. And I wish everybody would have known me 30 years ago. I was working a factory job, barely making ends meet. I remember every year we would get our income tax refund, in the spring. We filed and all that money went to catching up on bills. We would take that big stack of bills on the kitchen table, and we got our income tax check, and we'd whittle it down. And then over the course of the year, that stack of bills would pile up, get our next income tax refund, we'd whittle it down. And just one thing after another, just keep plugging away and having the guts to go out and start our own business with the tree business. That kind of took us to the next level financially, nowhere close to where we are today, but it got us on that track. And literally, I was in my mid to late 50s before things really fell into place. And people are seeing me today at 61. I'll be 62 here in about a little over a month. And they think that's what it's always been for Don. It's not always been that way. And I wish people could just see that and realize the journey it took to get here.
Well, and you're willing to share that story, and I feel like you've helped so many different people. You put out a ton of free content as well, and it's like, I wish I could be down. Well, you can ask them a question, and I've asked you a bunch of different questions, whether it's about business, all these different things, and you answer every single question. So it's, well, I don't know.
I feel like I've been blessed with this platform that, I got young guys today that see me as a role model, and I get literally handwritten letters. I get texts. I get emails every single day from young guys, especially guys like in their late teens, early 20s, and even into their 30s. Some, but it's usually those guys in their late teens, early 20s that are sending me these, and they look up to me, and they don't understand the struggle. They don't understand that when I was their age, I was probably even, lower financially than where they are. And I tried to encourage them, if I can do it, anybody can do it. And, I shared the story. I've just recently started sharing this. I shared it in Ohio at a seminar here earlier this month. I think it was June 3rd. I was over there. And, when I was a kid, I was one of those kids that was bullied to no end. I remember in high school, as a freshman in high school, being bullied to the point where I literally couldn't go to the cafeteria and eat my lunch because I was going to get food thrown at me or smacked up the side of the head with something, a milk carton or whatever. And lunch hour was like the worst part of the day for me. It was when all the students were together, from the freshmen to the seniors, and that's when the bullies were on their rampage looking for me and a buddy of mine. And it got so bad that I remember at one point we was taking our sack lunch to school, and we literally was was finding different places to hide until we got discovered at our hiding place, and then we'd have to find a new one. And I remember a period of time where we was laying under bushes outside in cold weather, eating our lunches, hiding from the bullies. And to go from, and people see me on social media today, and every once in a while I get my hackles up and I want to fight back. Well, it all goes back to that period where I was beat down, felt like the lowest person on earth, that everybody's looking down at you. And from having everybody looking down on you to having people look up to you, that's a big journey. And it's one that I probably didn't always handle so well because, you know, I developed a chip on my shoulder. And by the time I was in my late teens, early 20s, I just decided, you know what, I've had enough of this crap. I'd want to take a beating before people are going to pick on me anymore. And I just developed a bad attitude. And when people give me their crap, I'm giving it right back to them. And I've tried my best to get over that, but every once in a while somebody will post something on social media, and I'll go back to those days when I was a kid when I decided I was done being bullied. And you're going to throw it my way, it's coming right back at you, buddy. And that's not a good excuse, but it's the truth. Mm-hmm. So these people today that have these preconceived ideas about me, and that I've always had a silver spoon and things have been handed to me. Guys, I'm telling you, the journey that I've been on, from that kid laying under the bushes to being where people literally look up to me, that's a long way. I'm telling you, mentally, to go to thinking that everybody's looking down on you to accepting that people actually look up to you, I mean, that's hard to do.
Yeah. With a lot of your, I guess, the financial success, you know, happening mid-50s, what do you attribute that to? By doing the same thing for so many, writing articles for North American Whitetail, creating books, and building a business over a very long period of time? Is it not quitting, the repetition of doing it for a very long time and building a name and reputation? What would you attribute that to? Because I would, just outside looking in, like pretty rapid growth at some point.
Well, I think it starts with passion. If you're passionate about what you're doing, then you're going to find a way to make it successful. And I was always single-minded in my passion. It was always deer and big deer. I look back on some of the folks that I grew up with that were kids when I was a kid, and today they're my age. And the common theme I see amongst these folks, and good friends of mine to this day, this is not meant in a negative way whatsoever, but a lot of those folks, their interest changed over the years. They were very interested in the outdoors like I was when we were younger, but they lost that. And I've seen some of them, every few years their passion changes. Maybe for a while they're really into fishing, and then for a while they're really into golf, and then for a while they're really into something else. I've got the same passions today that I had from the time I was in kindergarten. Yeah. It's animals and wildlife and livestock. I mean, today I've still got beef cattle. I had that interest from when I was a kid. It's always been livestock and wildlife, and it just never changed, and I've been so passionate about it. Everything I did was really related to that in some way. So when I was writing about deer. My business adventures have been related to deer habitat. And I think it's that passion that you're either born with it or you're not. If a person doesn't have that passion, I don't think they can develop it on their own. I think they're either born with it or they're not.
They're not going to do it for 40 years either,
nope.
Or 50 years for that matter.
Not over time.
Yeah. What's a hill you're willing to die on that you would get canceled by the hunting industry?
Well, I mean, I'm going to stick to every one of my principles. I know, I speak, I've done it on this podcast. I spoke out about crossbows and expandable broadheads, and I think I get misquoted on that a lot. My quote is, or my position is, I think expandables, if you want to use them, it's your choice if they're legal. In my opinion, they're not near as efficient on a questionable hit. and that's why I don't use them. But that's not my place to tell everyone else. With crossbows, I think, yeah, there should be a crossbow season, but it should not be the entire archery season for able-bodied people. Now, if someone is not able-bodied, absolutely get a crossbow and get in the woods. In fact, I've said that the day is probably going to come where my health may force me to use a crossbow, and I absolutely will when that day comes. And I've been misquoted on that numerous times. But I think, I know without a doubt, I've done well in the hunting industry, but I also know without a doubt that my firm beliefs have cost me a lot of money in the hunting industry as well, a lot of business with potential consulting clients or partnerships with certain companies, sponsorships with certain companies. That's one thing that's not for sale with me. My principles, my reputation, my integrity has never been for sale and never will be. With Chasing Giants podcast, literally, we probably turned down 75% of the potential sponsors that we could have. If 4 people come to us about sponsorships, we're going to eliminate 3 of them based on either the quality of the product. If we're not going to use it, we're not going to promote it, or the quality of the people behind the product. If they could have the best product on the planet, but if it's shady people running the country, we're not going to be part of it. And I think that that strong ethical principles has cost me in other ways. I mean, I think it's opened some doors as well.
Probably balanced out more than you realize.
Well, potentially. I have had people reach out, and the only reason they wanted to be associated as a sponsor was because of the integrity. But I think that there's also these people that are always trying to, not necessarily sponsors, but you got these people that want to be in the hunting industry that want to question your integrity. When you try to stand on Christian principles, for example, there's people that always want to try to find an example of where you didn't follow Christian principles and use that against you. And all I do is the best I can. I know better than anybody else. There's not a person listening to this podcast that I think I'm better than. And I think we're all equals. I think we don't always get equal opportunities in life, but I think that if we push forward and we've got the passion, doors will eventually open. And, I read something else on the internet a while back where it said that it was something in regard to being a millionaire. The majority of millionaires have a college degree. And I'm not sure that I believe that, because I can show you communities where most of the people in the community only have an 8th grade graduation or an 8th grade education, and yet per capita there's way more millionaires than there is in the rest of the society, and that's the Amish community. You go to the Amish community and there's a lot of very successful people with lots of money, millionaires, and most of them have an 8th grade education. But what they've got, what it really takes to be a millionaire, is 2 things. It takes a good work ethic, which the Amish have. I mean, there's hardly an Amish that don't have a good work ethic. And the other thing is they've got an entrepreneurial spirit. They're willing to go in business for themselves. I do a lot of consulting for very wealthy clients, way wealthier than I am. And what I see with these people is the majority of them own their own business. They're not a doctor working for a hospital. They're not a lawyer working for a firm. These guys own their own business. They're calling the shots. When you work for somebody else, you're compensated based on the hours you put in or your salary. There's a limit. There's a limit how many hours you can work every week. When you own your own business, you're compensated by the effort you put forth, not by the hours, by the effort. And I told my daughters, I said, if you want to make it in life, don't go to college, start a business of some kind. Neither one of them listened to me. They both went to college. I'm going to tell my grandsons the same thing. If you want to really make it. Now, if there's certain things, if your goal is to become something like a doctor, then obviously you got to go to college. But if your goal is to make a lot of money, buy land, have a big house, fancy cars, whatever it is, and you need money to do it, you got to have a work ethic, but you got to have that entrepreneurial spirit. You got to go into business for yourself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's I don't know. I feel like, do you think do you think the traits of what you've been able to build with the businesses parallel with hunting? And what I'm getting, okay, so I'm just trying to think of like a lot of the really, really successful hunters I know are extremely disciplined, and I feel like discipline shows up in a variety of different places, whether it's running a business or whatever it may be. So that's where I was kind of aiming at.
Absolutely. The most successful deer hunters that I've ever met were also successful in other areas of their life. Now, deer hunting was high on their priority list, and in some cases higher than it should have been. But it's not like that was the only thing they did well. If they're a very good deer hunter, one of the best, not just good, but one of the best, they're also very good at other things. And a lot of times that's business. And a lot of times the business success allows them to be more successful as a deer hunter because it allows them to set their schedule. It allows them the financial freedom to come and go to own hunting property, but then to come and go from that property on their own schedule, not a schedule of an employer. So there's definitely some correlation.
Who would you put on the Mount Rushmore of best whitetail hunters?
Oh, well, I'd put Bobby Worthington there. He'd be number one on the list. If you look at what he's done and where he's done it, I think he stands on his own. I would probably there's a guy that not many people have heard of, a local guy named Lee Mitchell.
I've heard of him.
Lee Mitchell is a fantastic deer hunter. Very low key. I think most people, even in his home community, do not realize how good he is.
What makes him so good?
Consistent success on public land, and people don't even realize some of the bucks he drags off of public land. He's real quiet about it. A real humble guy, but he's done it all over the country. He's done it. I think he grew up or lived when he was earlier in Georgia, and was fantastic with whitetails down there. He is a biologist. He manages a farm or a ranch in Texas. Does it down there. He's just in a category of his own as far as being able to read, aerial photos, topographical maps, things like that. Just really, really good. And yet nobody knows him. But
how old is he?
He's,
roughly.
If I had to guess, I'd say around 50.
How'd you come across him?
He's fairly local here.
Okay, so all right.
Yeah, he's written some articles for Whitetail Life. He was in my book, Whitetail Icons book.
Okay.
But he would be there on the Mount Rushmore.
You got 2 left.
Oh, wow.
Once I said it was 2, you had other people on the tip of your tongue.
Wow. There's a lot of really, really, really good hunters, but it's hard to separate. There's a group that it's hard to separate one or two out of that group. The Wensels, Gene and Barry Wensel, they were pioneers that kind of almost created the modern day whitetail craze. They probably deserve to be up there. And I think between them, they've killed one buck over 200 inches. You've got a lot of guys that have killed multiple 200s, but they didn't do it like those guys did. Those guys have been hunting with traditional equipment their entire lives. And I think I heard one time that they've never paid for a lease. They did own some land in Iowa at one time, and that's where their only 200 came from, a buck called Woody that Gene shot back in 2004. Same year I shot my first 200, cool. Actually. So, what's the parameters? Are you going to say the most 200s? But then there's no even playing field. Yeah. And every deer hunter has had a different playing field than all the other deer hunters. So it's hard to separate, and it's hard to base it just on kills. And that's why Bobby Worthington was so easy, because This guy lives in East Tennessee. He doesn't even live in the Midwest.
Yeah.
And I think he's had 7 or 9 of his bucks featured in North American Whitetail. They were big enough for feature articles. I mean, absolute giants. The bucks, some of the bucks he's killed in East Tennessee would be giants in Iowa. That's how big they are. So he easily stands out from the crowd in my mind. And then the waters become a little more muddied as I start looking at the number 3 and number 4, because there's just so many guys that you could make an argument for, but you could also make an argument for not including them and including somebody else. And
yeah, it would be tough.
It's really hard to pick those last 2.
That's a cop-out answer. I'm just kidding.
You're probably right, but
no, I'm kidding. Yeah, I think I got to spend a day with Bobby Worthington. That's the first time I ever met him in person. I read his book, really enjoyed my time with him, and just really a privilege when I left. It was like, man, he definitely should go down in the history books as one of the greatest of all time, and also just way before his time, I guess, is easy, like a whitetail pioneer, I guess is the easiest way to say it.
Yeah, and it's just a shame more people don't know who he is.
Well, after I left the trip, I was like, well, who'd you go see? And it was Bobby Worthington, and a lot of people were like, who? And
yeah,
and it's like, it's kind of crazy. But do you think that is just regional to? I assume people in the South know Bobby a lot more than maybe the Midwest, or do you think that's not a fair?
Well, I think Bobby has been pretty low key. He wrote some
That's true.
articles for North American Whitetail over the years, but when the whole social media and the internet scene came on, he wasn't a part of that. He's just a good old country boy, and that wasn't his cup of tea. But just going to the woods and shooting big deer is his thing.
Yeah.
Fantastic archer. I mean, the guy can shoot rabbits on the run with his bow.
I think he has 8 world championships, and he did not start shooting professional or competitively until his 60s.
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, just a fantastic archer. Hunting skills out of this world. He's a woodsman. Besides just being a deer hunter, he's a woodsman. So I've put him number 1 for a number of years, and for good reason. Yeah. And I've never had a reason to change my mind yet.
Fair enough. Well, anything else that's on your mind here?
I'm just looking forward to season. I'm looking forward to getting those trail cameras out. I got 2 or 3 bucks that I'm really anxious to see what they've got on their heads this year, and it's about that time to get them out.
Yeah, and we broke down a bunch of different summer strategies and things to do, checklists for this summer that will be on live on the Mastery Academy. And I always appreciate you carving out time to do the podcast and continuing to help with everything with the Mastery Academy. It's been a great experience. So just want to say thank you for that and really appreciate everything.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, and I'm here to help young guys as much as I can. And I got to where I'm at by other people helping me out, and I always try to pass it along. And I'm no better than anybody else, and just want to share what knowledge I have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Don. I really appreciate it.
Yep, you're welcome, Jake.